Hi everyone, it's Thursday lunchtime and I'm hurrying to get this done by the time you guys turn up. We're doing finger knitting, which middle one has already learned how to do, but I want to show you a couple of things about it. First is, the finger knitting I taught middle one was using a single piece of wool, and you can see here, if I get it in focus, you can see here that it's quite tight. That's a tightly knitted one. This is a loosely knitted one. You can see all the individual stitches, it's very stretchy. And this one is a pretty good tension. It's still a bit stretchy, whereas the really tight one isn't very stretchy at all. So when you're going through the videos, you need to be aiming for a tension a bit like the red one. So if I tie those in a knot, you guys will know that's what you're looking for. That's the one about tension. Okay, then the next thing I want to show you is that we did finger knitting with a single strand. You can also do it with multiple strands. So for example, you take two together, you make your slip knot. Don't worry, you'll learn how to do this in the videos. And you use the two together as though they're a single string. Can you see how I'm doing that? There's two, and I'm using them as a single string. Can you see this? Use them as a single string, and you end up with something a bit variegated. Just get rid of that. So I've got some here. I've got one that I did with two strands of yellow. You can see it's got two strands on the end. There's one I did with two strands, one yellow and one orange, and you can see it makes quite an interesting, how do I get that into focus? I can't. That makes quite an interesting effect. And then here's one I did using three strands. Now the thing to remember is, with these, let me put all these together. The thing to remember with finger knitting is that if you do a reasonably good tension, you are going to end up with a knitted length that's only a third of your original starting wool. And that matters when you come to the very last video on doing the flower, which is that if you want to end up with the thing to make the flower with, and I've got a flower here, whoops, that's that I made, the spiral is going to be 10 inches. So you need to start off with something a lot bigger. So if you want to end up with that at 10 inches, because she finger knits it once and then finger knits it again, if that's going to be 10 inches, the length of double finger knitting needs to be 30 inches, which means the length of the original finger knitting needs to be 90 inches. So you're going to need 90 inches of wool to start off to make the flower, more or less. Okay, so you can see here that I've got that I finger knitted once, and then I finger knitted my finger knitted to make it thicker. And this one's a bit clearer, you can see, because you can see I did an individual single strand of yellow that I finger knitted, an individual single strand of red that I finger knitted, and then just like I showed you, I put them both over my finger and finger knitted them as though it was a single strand, and I ended up with this variegated, which is a nice way of doing it. And if I rolled this up like the flower video, then you'd end up with a flower that's multicoloured. So that's a variation you can do as well. Then there's a bonus video that tells you how to do this sort of braid, where you're using two strands. Actually, I used 4 here. I used 2 together of yellow and 2 together of red, where you're using the 2 strands and 2 loops. All the instructions you need on how to do a slip knot, how 2 different ways of actually doing the finger knitting, as well as how to end, as well as making a flower, and then the last video is on making a braid. And what I did with my first braid that I made was, as you can see, I made my braid using the last video, and they got a single piece of yellow wool, and I stuck my needle through the braid at intervals about of an inch, so that it's like a snake tied together with the new piece of yellow wool. And then, if you get your yellow wool, whoops, there we go, and you squish them together like this, and tie it together, and fiddle around with it, that's your second flower. To do that, you will need a large needle. These are the sort of needles that get used to knit together jumpers, to knit together the sides. And if you don't have one of those, then use a thinner piece of thread that you can use instead of this to tie it together. Just use a thinner piece of thread that goes through your needle, and just make sure you tie it at the end. Okay? So have fun. Remember, your finished thing that you want to use for a bracelet or a necklace needs to be 3 times, your starting wool needs to be 3 times the length of what you want to finish off as a rough guide. I just used this 30%, I can't even tell whether that's in focus. Oh, there we go. 30% wool blend knitting yarn, £1.99 from B&M Bargains. I just bought a red one and a yellow one. And there we go. Have fun, kids. Show me what you've done at the end. I'm so sorry this is out of focus. I'll try better next time.